Hi guys, and welcome to Quiet Voice Podcast channel. Tonight we step into Alabama in 1845, where winter wind presses against pine boards, and a small black family cabin glows like a coal hidden in ash. Outside, the cold moves through the trees with a thin, hungry sound. Inside, blankets are pulled close. Embers breathe softly, and every corner holds the quiet skill of people making shelter from very little. What did warmth feel like when comfort was never guaranteed? What did rest mean when the world beyond the door had already planned tomorrow's labour? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and as the fire begins to murmur, comment where you are listening from and what your local time is. Someone far away may be hearing the same wind, only in another night. Now, dim the lights. You find yourself standing just inside the cabin door, with winter at your back and smoke in your hair. The room is small, but it does not feel empty. It feels gathered, as though every object has been placed there by tired hands that knew exactly what mattered. The door is made of rough boards, not perfectly fitted because perfection is expensive and rarely offered here. Cold air slips through the cracks and touches your ankles. It is not a dramatic cold, not the kind that arrives with trumpets. It is patient, nosy, and rude. A rolled cloth has been pushed against the bottom of the door. It slows the draft. Though the draft seems offended by this insult, it still finds its way in, thin as a whisper. You feel it curl around your feet while the fire answers with a low orange pulse. The cabin belongs to a black family living in Alabama in 1845, a cotton state built on forced labour. That fact sits quietly in the room, heavier than the iron pot near the hearth. Nobody needs to say it aloud. The walls already know. You're not entering a romantic wilderness hut. You're entering a place shaped by bondage, skill, exhaustion, and care. It is a home, and it is also not fully safe. That tension never leaves the boards beneath your feet. The air smells of wood smoke, cornmeal, damp wool, and pine knots slowly giving up their resin. Somewhere under those smells is earth, because the floor has been swept hard but not conquered. A packed dirt floor remembers every footstep. Near the hearth, a woman bends over the fire with a calm that looks almost effortless. Of course, nothing here is effortless. Her movements are practiced from years of waking while the sky still hides its face. She knows which coal will catch, which stick will smoke, and which child will wake if the pot lid clatters. You stand quietly, because quiet feels respectful here. The fire makes small clicking sounds, like someone thinking slowly. A child shifts under a blanket on a low pallet. Another breathes through a stuffy nose. The soft little whistle of winter sleep. The cabin is built of logs, roughly hewn, with mud daubing in the gaps. In some places the daubing has cracked. Straw, clay, and patience can only do so much against wet cold. Still, the family has patched what it can, because patching is almost a language here. A blanket hangs over one wall, not for beauty, though it has a faded stripe that tries its best. It keeps the chill from moving too freely through the room. It divides space without truly dividing it. Privacy, like sugar, is used carefully. You notice the bedding first because night is the subject of this place. There are blankets, quilts, sacks, and worn covers layered with attention. Nothing matches. Everything matters. The warmth is not in one fine object, but in the clever stacking of many poor ones. One quilt has pieces of old shirt sewn into it, a blue scrap, a brown scrap, a bit of calico printed with tiny flowers. The stitches are uneven in places, tighter in others, like a song remembered differently by each singer. Your fingers imagine the texture before you touch it. Cotton was everywhere in Alabama, yet soft abundance did not belong equally to everyone. By 1845, the Cotton Kingdom stretched across the deep South, and enslaved labour made its wealth possible. The cloth near you carries that contradiction in silence. The woman lifts a small iron spider pan, its three little legs blackened by use. It has spent years in firelight, which is more than many fancy pans can claim. Beside it sits an ash cake, buried near coals, cooking in the old practical way. There is something almost funny about the ash cake. It looks like food trying to disguise itself as part of the fireplace. Yet when brushed clean, it may offer warmth, weight, and a little sweetness if the corn is good. Humble food has no time for vanity. A man sits near the wall, pulling on coarse socks with slow care. His hands are broad and chapped. The knuckles look darkened by cold and work. He does not rush, because rushing against winter only lets winter laugh at you. He wears a shirt of rough cloth and trousers patched at the knee. The fabric scratches, and you can almost feel it at your own neck. Clothing here is protection first, comfort later, and beauty only when possible. Still, someone has mended it cleanly. A young girl, not fully awake, watches the fire through half-closed eyes. Her blanket is tucked around her shoulders. She looks at the sparks as if they are tiny travellers with secret news. Children often know how to make wonder from scraps. Near the rafters, dried herbs hang in small bundles. They shift whenever the wind presses through the cabin. The smell is faint, green, and dusty. Some plants are for flavour, some for sickness, and some perhaps for both, depending on who is telling the story. Historians still argue whether certain household remedies recorded later were common across all cabins, or remembered because they were unusual. Memory has its own weather. It warms some details and lets others freeze. So you look gently, without pretending to know everything. On a peg hangs a small gourd dipper, polished by use along its rim. It is ordinary, and yet it feels personal. A gourd can be cup, scoop, seed keeper, toy, and conversation piece if life asks enough of it. Life asks plenty here. A quirky little detail waits near the hearth. A bundle of sweet gum twigs rests in a corner, chewed at the ends into soft brushes. People use such twigs to clean teeth, freshen the mouth, and feel slightly more human before the day began. Dental luxury, cabin edition. The wind touches the roof and makes it complain, not loudly, just enough. The sound moves above you like fingers passing across an old drum. The children hear it in sleep and turn closer toward warmth. You notice how everyone understands the geography of heat. The youngest child sleeps nearest the safer warmth, not too close to sparks. Adults take the edges, where drafts patrol. Blankets are not just covers here. They are a map of care. The firelight paints faces in amber and shadow. It softens tiredness without erasing it. That is perhaps the kindness of a hearth. It does not solve the world. It simply makes a circle where the world must wait outside. A tin cup catches the glow, dented along one side. A wooden spoon lies beside a bowl. There is no clutter for decoration, only the clutter of survival. Even the silence seems to have a job. You hear a rooster somewhere beyond the cabin, confused or ambitious. It gives one rough call and then thinks better of it. The woman near the hearth breathes out a laugh through her nose. It is barely a sound, but it changes the room. Humour lives here quietly. It cannot afford to be wasteful. A sideways glance, a muttered remark, a rooster with poor timing. These become small luxuries. Not all warmth comes from fire, thankfully. The man reaches for his shoes, stiff from cold. They resist his feet like stubborn little animals. He presses one heel down and pauses. The leather creaks. You can feel the discomfort in your own bones, though you have done nothing to deserve it. Outside, Alabama winter is not northern winter, but that does not make it gentle. Damp cold has a talent for getting inside clothing and staying there. Frost may silver the ground in the morning. Mud may take over by afternoon. Both are inconvenient employees. The cabin's single window is covered, not with glass, but with a shutter and cloth. Glass panes were costly, and this family's world is measured in what can be spared. The cloth moves slightly with each breath of wind. It looks alive. You step nearer to the hearth, and warmth touches your shins. Your back remains cool. This unevenness becomes the truth of the room. One side of you relaxes while the other remembers winter. Comfort arrives in portions. The woman brushes ash from the bread with a practiced hand. She does not fuss. She knows ash is not the enemy when hunger is nearby. A little grit is annoying, yes, but so are kings, taxes, and squeaky doors. You choose your battles. A pot of water warms slowly, sending up a faint mineral smell. Steam rises in thin threads. It dampens the smoke and softens the air. The whole cabin seems to inhale. The youngest child wakes and blinks at nothing. For a moment, there is no history, no cotton, no law, no labour. There is only a child emerging from sleep beside a fire. Then the room gathers itself again, because morning is not sentimental. You feel the blanket nearest your hand. It is thick in some places and thin in others. The surface is rough, but underneath it holds warmth, the way old things hold stories. It smells faintly of smoke because everything smells faintly of smoke. Smoke is not merely atmosphere here. It gets into hair, cloth, baskets, and dreams. It stings the eyes when the draught turns tricky. It also preserves signals, warms, and gathers people close. An annoying miracle, really. A small Bible may rest on a shelf, or perhaps a hymn remembered by heart fills that place instead. Enslaved people in Alabama lived under laws that often restricted reading and movement. Still, faith, memory, and oral teaching travelled by routes no patrol could fully map. You look around and understand that the cabin is not simply poor. It is intelligent. Every peg, bundle, patch, pot, and folded cloth speaks of choices made within harsh limits. This room has been negotiated into being. The woman divides food with a careful eye. Nobody comments on the portions. To comment would be rude to hope itself. The children receive what they need first, or as close to need as the morning allows. The adults pretend not to notice the arithmetic. A boy rubs his arms and leans closer to the heat. His hair catches the firelight. His toes curl beneath the blanket. He's still inside the last softness of sleep, that brief kingdom where no overseer calls your name. The man murmurs something about the wind. The woman answers that the wind has plenty of mouth this morning. The girl smiles into her blanket. It is not a grand joke, but it lands gently. Even the fire seems to approve. You hear the roof again, the long sigh of air moving over split shingles. Somewhere outside, pine branches scrape together. The sound is dry and feathery. It could be rain, but it is only trees whirring aloud. In 1845, cabins like this varied widely across plantations and farms. Some were sturdier, some meaner, some crowded beyond comfort. Scholars debate how much privacy families could truly claim inside such quarters. The answer changes by place, owner, season, and the strength of kinship. Here, in this imagined room, the family claims what it can. A corner becomes a sleeping place. A pot becomes a promise. A blanket becomes a wall. A whispered name becomes an inheritance. The door rattles once, and everyone looks toward it. Only wind. Still, the glance tells you enough. In a world where authority can enter without kindness, even a harmless sound carries weight. The room settles again, slowly. You breathe in smoke and corn and damp cloth. You breathe out the strange ache of being warm where others are not free. Bedtime history often asks you to rest among uncomfortable truths. Softness does not erase them. It makes room to face them. The fire lowers, then brightens as a stick shifts inward. Sparks climb and disappear. You watch them vanish into the chimney shadow. Tiny orange thoughts leaving no record. History is full of such sparks. Lives glimpsed only briefly, yet real. The family moves with growing purpose now. Morning will demand bodies, patience, and strength. But for this short while, the cabin holds them together beneath the winter wind. Blankets still cling to shoulders. Food warms hands. The hearth keeps its red eye open. You remain near the fire. feeling the split world of warmth and cold. Outside waits frost, labour, and the pale grey light of Alabama winter. Inside, the air is close, smoky, and human. A child yawns, a spoon taps wood, the woman lifts the bread, and for one quiet breath, the cabin is not just a shelter. It is a small, glowing answer to the night. You wake in darkness that is not quite empty. It has shape, breath, and a reddish glow trembling along the cabin wall. The fire has fallen low, but it has not surrendered. Beneath the grey skin of ash, a few coals still hold their heat like secrets kept through a bitter night. The air feels colder near your face than beneath the blanket. Your nose notices first, because noses are dramatic little weather prophets. Each breath carries smoke, damp cloth, old wood, and the faint sourness of bodies sleeping close together. It is not unpleasant. It is human. You lie still and listen. The cabin is full of small sounds that only appear in deep winter quiet. A child breathes in soft uneven waves. A sleeper shifts on rustling bedding. The hearth gives a tiny crack, as if embarrassed to interrupt the dark. Outside, the wind moves around the cabin with long, searching fingers. It presses at the door and slides over the roof. It seems to ask whether any warmth has been left unattended. The cabin answers with logs, clay, cloth, and stubbornness. Then the woman rises. She does not leap awake. Nobody leaps awake in a cold cabin unless something's on fire, which would be rude. She lifts herself slowly, pulling a wrap around her shoulders. Her bare feet find the floor with careful memory. The packed earth is cold enough to make the bones complain. You watch her cross the room in near silence. She knows where everything is by touch. The stool, the pot, the poker, the bundle of kindling. Darkness does not confuse her. It has been part of her morning for years. She kneels near the hearth and leans toward the ash. Her breath moves the surface slightly. With a stick, she uncovers the coals, one gentle scrape at a time. Red appears under grey, glowing softly, like little eyes opening. This is the first work of morning. Fire must be coaxed, not commanded. She feeds it pine splinters and a twist of dry grass. Smoke rises, hesitates, then decides to climb. A thin flame takes hold with a quiet blue lick. There it is. Morning begins. Your blanket has trapped a pocket of warmth around your legs, and you dislike leaving it. This feeling is ancient and highly reasonable. Across centuries, across continents, people have negotiated with blankets and lost. The blanket always makes a strong argument. The man opens his eyes but does not sit up yet. He listens first. That listening is its own kind of labour. He measures the wind, the fire, the children, the silence outside. In 1845 Alabama, a day could turn on weather, commands, illness, or mood. The cotton economy shaped much of life here, even in winter. Enslaved workers were often assigned tasks according to season, from field preparation to repairs, hauling, clearing, and caring for animals. The cold did not cancel labour, it merely changed its costume. The woman adds a larger stick to the flame. It pops and sends a sharp smell of resin through the room. Pine burns quickly, bright and talkative. Oak, when available, gives a steadier heat. Firewood is not only fuel, it is planning. A boy stirs and pulls the blanket over his head. His mother notices without looking. Mothers have mysterious radar, and history has not improved upon it. She lets him have a few more breaths of sleep. Mercy, sometimes, is measured in minutes. The girl rises next, wrapped in a coverlet that trails behind her. She moves toward the hearth like a little ghost with responsibilities. Her hair is flattened on one side. Her eyes are heavy, but her hands already know the morning tasks. She reaches for a small broom made of bundled twigs. The broom scratches softly over the packed floor. Dust moves, ash moves, little crumbs move. The sound is dry and steady. a humble music of order returning to a crowded room. A quirky detail rests in that broom. In many rural households, including enslaved cabins, homemade brooms might be tied from broom sedge, corn husks, or twigs. They could sweep a floor, brush a hearth, or serve as a child's pretend horse when nobody important was watching. The youngest child wakes unhappy, which is fair. Cold mornings rarely ask for consent. A small whimper rises from the bedding. The woman turns and murmurs without stopping her work. Her voice is low, warm, and practical, like broth in a plain bowl. You sit up, and the cold finds your shoulders immediately. It has been waiting. The blanket slides down, and the room's chill greets your neck with rude confidence. Near the hearth, warmth thickens. Away from it, winter still owns the corners. The man stands and reaches toward the rafters, where strips of drying cloth hang from a peg. He shakes one piece loose and wraps it round his throat. The fabric is stiff from smoke and cold. It softens as his skin warms it. He steps to the door and pauses. The room seems to pause with him. He lifts the wooden latch and opens the door only a little. A slice of iron-coloured dawn appears outside. Cold air rushes in like it has been invited to dinner. It smells of frost, wet leaves, and distant animals. Somewhere nearby, a mule stamps. A rooster calls again, more confident now, though confidence is not the same as usefulness. The sky beyond the doorway is pale and low. The man looks out, then closes the door quickly. The latch drops. Everyone breathes easier. The cabin's small supply of heat has been defended for another moment. You respect this kind of victory. It is not glamorous, but it is real. The woman pours water into a pot. The sound is hollow and clean. It comes from a bucket near the wall, its wooden staves dark with damp. Water must be carried, guarded, and used wisely. Convenience has not yet moved into this room. Historians continue to debate how much time enslaved families could control during early mornings. Some accounts suggest brief private routines, while others describe harsh schedules with little freedom. The truth shifts by plantation size, overseer discipline, household arrangements, and the season's demands. Here, time feels borrowed. The fire grows stronger, and shadows begin to lift. You can see more clearly now. A hanging cloth near the wall trembles. A clay chink between logs has crumbled at one edge. A wooden bowl sits upside down to keep out dust and wandering insects. The girl kneels beside a small pile of kindling and sorts it by size. Tiny splinters first, then finger-thick twigs, then heavier sticks. This knowledge is simple only to people who have never needed it. A bad fire can waste precious minutes and colder hands. The boy finally emerges from the blanket. His face is serious, as though he's been summoned to a court of law. He rubs his eyes with both fists. His mother gives him a look. It says, "Wash yourself," and also do not complain too loudly. He reaches for the water. It is cold enough to insult him. He splashes his face and gasps softly. The girl smiles without turning her head. Sibling sympathy is a delicate instrument, often played incorrectly. You feel the cabin changing from sleeping place to working place. Bedding is folded, not neatly by fancy standards, but tightly enough to save space. Blankets are shaken near the hearth to loosen night dampness. Pallets become sitting spots. Corners regain their daytime use. The woman stirs the pot, and steam begins to rise. Cornmeal waits in a cloth sack. It is not abundant, yet it carries the day's first promise. In many enslaved households, cornmeal was a staple ration, often joined by pork, molasses, greens, or whatever could be grown or gathered. You notice how the family treats the meal sack. It is opened carefully, closed carefully, and moved away from sparks. Grain is not casual. It is counted in hunger avoided. A careless spill would be remembered by everyone, including the floor. The woman mixes meal with hot water and a pinch of salt if salt remains. The mixture thickens under her hand. She forms it without ceremony. Her palm knows the texture by instinct, soft enough to cook through, firm enough to hold shape. The smell changes. Warm corn rises above smoke. It is plain, comforting, and slightly sweet. Your stomach responds, because stomachs have very little respect for historical distance. Hunger makes every century local. A small child watches the food with solemn devotion. The expression is almost religious. Perhaps that is not entirely wrong. Food has always had sacred qualities when it arrives from struggle. Bread, porridge, cake, mush, whatever name it wears. It gathers attention. The man takes a small tool from a shelf and checks its edge with his thumb. Not a weapon in this moment, but a working blade used for rope, wood, and repairs. He wraps it carefully. Tools are precious because they extend the body's strength. The girl carries ash in a broken bowl toward the door. She opens it just enough to toss the ash outside. Wynne tries once more to enter with great enthusiasm. She shuts it fast, triumphant. A child can learn household warfare early. Ash has uses too. It can help with cleaning, lye making, and managing waste around a hearth. Nothing here is only one thing. Even what looks spent may return as service. Poverty teaches recycling without making it sound fashionable. The first grey light reaches the covered window. It does not brighten the room so much as thin the darkness. Faces become clearer. The woman's cheek shows a faint line from sleep. The man's hands are cracked along the knuckles. The children look both young and already practiced. You hear distant movement now. Another cabin door opens somewhere nearby. A cough travels through the cold. A voice calls, low and brief. The plantation quarters. If these cabins are arranged near one another, wake like a body with many rooms. The sound carries community and surveillance together. People are near enough to help and near enough to be watched. That is a hard arrangement for the soul. Still, a neighbour's cough may mean someone survived the night. In winter, that matters. The woman turns the cakes in the pan, the edge is brown, and the smell deepens. A little smoke catches in your throat. Your eyes water. Nobody makes a fuss. Smoke is practically a resident, and not the most difficult one. The man accepts a small portion and eats standing. He chews slowly, not because there is leisure, but because food must last in the mouth as well as the belly. The boy receives his share and blows on it. Steam touches his face. There is no grand breakfast table. There is a sequence, a rhythm, an understanding. Hands pass food, cups, cloth, and tools. The cabin is too small for wasted motion. Everyone moves like part of a quiet machine made of kinship. The woman tucks a piece of food into cloth. It may be saved for later, or carried out into the day. Saving is not stinginess here. Saving is strategy. The future is always hungry, and it has an excellent memory. You feel the floor under your feet. Cold rises through your soles. Near the hearth. The earth is dry and hard. Near the door. It feels faintly damp. Every part of the cabin has its own climate. You could map it with your toes. The youngest child is dressed now, bundled in layers that have known other bodies. Sleeves are rolled, a hem is tucked, a cord ties where a button is missing. The result is not elegant, but it works. Elegance can wait outside and shiver. The man lifts his coat or heavy outer garment, whatever rough protection he has. It smells of smoke, sweat, and weather. He pulls it around himself, shoulders rising against the cold that waits beyond the door. His face settles into workday stillness. The woman checks the children with quick hands. Hair, cloth, shoes, faces, food. Each touch is small, but each says something. You are seen. You are needed. You're not alone in this cold room. The fire is banked with care, fed enough to live, not enough to waste. Coals are arranged for the next need. Flame is treated like a household member with a difficult personality. Give it too much, it becomes danger. Give it too little, it abandons you. Outside, the dawn has arrived without warmth. The wind still travels through the pine trees, dragging the smell of frost and wet bark. The cabin door opens again. This time, people must pass through it, For one last moment, you remain inside the smoky glow. The bedding is folded, the pot is steaming, the floor is swept, and the fire keeps its careful heart. Night has been changed into morning by hands that never asked history for applause. You understand, gently and heavily, that survival here is not one dramatic act. It is hundreds of small ones, repeated in the dark, a coal saved, a child covered, a cake turned, a draught blocked, a breath taken. The wind enters as the door opens wider. The family steps toward the pale day, carrying warmth inside their clothing for as long as it lasts. You sit close to the hearth while the cabin settles into the particular silence that comes when people are dressing for cold. It is not a sleepy silence now. It is alert, filled with small decisions. Cloth is lifted, shaken, folded, searched, straightened, and pressed against skin that would rather stay near the fire. The first touch of a garment is never neutral in winter. A shirt left in the cold corner feels almost wet at the seams. A stocking stiffens like it has developed personal objections. A child makes a face at a sleeve. And honestly, the sleeve deserves it. The woman warms a small piece of cloth between her hands before wrapping it around the youngest child's neck. The gesture is quick, almost hidden, yet it holds the whole philosophy of the room. If the world gives little, you warm the little before passing it on. You notice the clothing more carefully now. It is made from coarse cloth, some of it homespun, some of it issued, traded, inherited, or remade from older pieces. Cotton, wool, tow linen, and mixed fabrics appear in patches and layers. Each piece has survived use, washing, weather, and repair. Nothing hangs loose for style. Loose cloth catches, tears, and wastes heat. Sleeves are tightened, trouser legs are tucked, a scrap of cord becomes a belt, a shawl becomes a hood, a child's outgrown garment becomes another child's beginning. This is care with a needle. A basket near the wall holds scraps too small for ordinary use. Tiny bits of cloth rest there like fallen leaves. Some are faded beyond naming. Some still show stripes, checks, or dull flowers. You might call them remnants. But in this cabin, remnants are possibilities waiting for patience. The woman takes one scrap and studies it with practical tenderness. It may mend a cuff, pad a sore heel, or strengthen a quilt's worn square. Every inch matters. Waste is a luxury with a smug little face, and nobody has invited it indoors. In Alabama in 1845, enslaved people often received clothing allowances from enslavers, commonly once or twice a year. These allowances varied greatly in quality and quantity. Coarse shoes, rough fabric, and limited seasonal clothing were common complaints in historical accounts. You feel the meaning of that fact in the room. It is not a number on a page. It is a child's cold wrist. It is a man turning a sleeve to hide a tear. It is a woman making winter answer to whatever cloth she can command. The girl sits on a low stool, holding a garment across her knees. She threads a needle with intense seriousness. Her tongue touches one corner of her mouth. The thread refuses once, then twice. Thread has always enjoyed humiliating people before breakfast. At last, she catches the eye of the needle, a small victory. She pulls the thread through and ties a knot. Her mother glances over, says nothing, and continues sorting clothing. Approval can be quiet when work is shared. The stitch begins near a torn seam. It goes in and out, a small dark line across pale cloth. The girl's stitches are not perfect, but they hold. Holding is the point. Beauty may arrive later, if it has finished bothering richer people. You run your fingers over a folded quilt. The surface is uneven, ridged where seams overlap. Some squares are soft from old wear, others are rougher, newer, almost proud of themselves. The backing feels heavier, perhaps pieced from sackcloth or sturdy worn fabric. The quilt is not merely bedding, it is archive, insulation, inheritance, an emergency door. Draped over shoulders, it becomes a cloak, spread across sleeping bodies. It becomes shared shelter, hung over a crack. It becomes architecture, Very few objects are so hard-working. Quilting traditions among black families carried African, European, indigenous, and regional influences, though historians still discuss how specific patterns and meanings travelled. Some popular claims about secret quilt codes remain debated, especially because firm evidence from the period is limited and often later in origin. That uncertainty does not lessen the quilt. It may not need a secret code to be powerful. Its message is already clear enough. We saved. We stitched. We covered one another. We made warmth where the law made hardship. A quirky little object sits beside the mending basket. It is a pincushion shaped from a scrap stuffed with hair, lint, or worn threads. Needles are pushed into it carefully. In a household where metal is precious, losing a needle can become an event worthy of sighs, searching, and accusations directed at innocent floorboards. The woman checks a pair of shoes near the hearth. They are stiff, worn at the edges, and dark with old mud. The soles have been patched. One lace is not a lace at all, but a strip of twisted cloth. It does its duty without requesting a better title. Shoes carry special importance here. A barefoot in winter is not poetic. It is pain, cracked skin, illness, and slower work. Enslaved adults and children often received shoes of poor quality, sometimes only once a year. Many learn to endure what should not have been endured. The boy lifts one shoe and turns it toward the fire. His mother warns him not to scorch it. He pulls it back at once. The shoe needs warmth, but not disaster. The line between helpful and foolish can be extremely narrow near flames. You smell leather as it softens. There is also wool, smoke, ash, and something faintly oily from cloth rubbed with fat or grease to resist damp. The mixture is strong and intimate. It is the smell of bodies preparing to meet weather. A small child complains that a garment itches. The woman answers that itching means it is still there. This is not sympathy. Exactly. It is survival humour, delivered without cruelty. The child pouts anyway, which is also historically accurate. The man uses a sliver of wood to scrape dried mud from a trouser cuff. The flakes fall onto the floor, dull brown against grey ash. Mud is part of winter labour in the south. It grips hems, eats shoes, and makes every path feel longer. He checks his hands next. The skin is split near one thumb. The woman passes him a little grease from a small container, perhaps saved from cooking fat. He rubs it into the crack. The touch is brief, practical, and necessary. Pain must be managed, not admired. You notice how care moves between people without ceremony. A cloth passed, a knot tied, a collar turned down, a child pulled nearer. No one announces tenderness. It simply travels through the room, disguised as work. The girl finishes her seam and bites the thread. Her mother inspects it with one quick touch. The seam will hold. The girl's shoulders lift a little. Pride, like fire, must be fed carefully. Too much praise embarrasses it. Too little starves it. A folded blanket is lifted from a peg. It is heavier than it looks. The outer fabric is rough, but the inner layers hold trapped warmth. When it is shaken open, the air fills with dust and smoke. Sunlight has not yet reached the room, but the quilt seems to remember summer faintly. You imagine the making of it. Night work, stolen time, tired fingers, children leaning close, scraps saved from garments that once held moving bodies. Perhaps a neighbour gave one piece. Perhaps an older relative left another. Perhaps one square came from a dress worn on a rare visiting day. The quilt's colours are subdued by soot and age. Brown, indigo, faded red, yellow almost gone. Nothing shines, yet the arrangement has rhythm. A pattern can be modest and still insist on beauty. That insistence matters. In a world designed to reduce people to labour, decoration becomes a quiet refusal, a shaped patch, a careful border, a colour saved because it pleases the eye. These are not small things. They say the spirit has not handed over its keys. The woman wraps the quilt around the youngest child and then unwraps it, testing how it falls. Too loose. She folds one side under and secures it with a strip. The child becomes a bundled creature, mostly eyes and suspicion. The boy laughs. The child objects. The room warms with that tiny domestic storm. For a moment, the cabin is not only a place of want, it is also a place where someone can look ridiculous and be loved for it. You feel the rough weave of your own borrowed cover against your palms. The threads rise and dip. Some are coarse enough to scratch. Others have been softened by years of skin, washing, smoke, and sleep. Time is the gentlest fabric softener, though it is terrible at everything else. The woman lifts a blue cloth and holds it against the light from the small window. A thin place shows near the shoulder. She frowns, not dramatically, but with the sadness of arithmetic. One more repair, one more demand, one more small battle scheduled by fabric. She chooses a patch, not the prettiest, the strongest. Winter does not care for appearances, which is convenient because winter itself looks rather gloomy most mornings. She sets the patch in place and begins to stitch. The needle flashes in the firelight. In, out, pull, in, out, pull. The sound is nearly nothing, but you begin to hear it. Thread whispers through cloth. The patch settles down. A weakness becomes less weak. This is how the cabin survives, too. Not by becoming strong all at once, but by being strengthened repeatedly where strain appears. Clay in a gap, cloth at a door, a quilt over shoulders, a word spoken when silence grows too hard. The man reaches for a cap, crushed from use and smoke darkened at the brim. He presses it onto his head. Heat escapes from the body quickly through uncovered skin, and everyone knows this without needing a medical lecture. The body teaches lessons clearly when cold is present. A child's fingers are wrapped in cloth strips because gloves are absent. The strips are tied firm enough to stay, loose enough to move. They will not keep out all cold. They may keep out enough. Enough is a powerful word here, and a painful one. You hear a cough from the youngest child. The woman pauses, listening for its depth. Not every cough is danger, but Winter watches lungs closely. She touches the child's forehead, then the back of the neck. Her hand remains there one breath longer than needed. Illness in a small cabin could move quickly. Smoke, crowding, dampness, poor nutrition, and exposure all carried risks. Yet families also possessed knowledge of teas, poultices, rest, and nursing passed through generations. Some remedies helped, some comforted. Comfort itself had value. A bundle of dried leaves is selected from the rafters. The woman crushes a little between her fingers. The smell is sharp and green, cutting through smoke. It may become a warm drink later if the cough deepens. For now, she watches. The girl folds the mended garment and places it near the door. She runs one hand over the seam as if smoothing worry from it. You feel that gesture. People often touch what they cannot fully protect. The cabin brightens by degrees. Morning enters not as a flood, but as a grey patience. The patched quilts show more clearly. The rough clothes reveal their faded histories. The faces around you become less firelit and more earthly. You notice that warmth is not simply temperature. It is planning, memory, touch, and the refusal to let anyone face cold completely uncovered. It lives in grease rubbed into cracked skin, in cloth strips around fingers, in a child placed nearer the hearth. The family stands nearly ready now. The cabin looks changed again. Bedding has become bundles. Bundles have become clothing. Clothing has become armour of the softest possible kind. No metal shines. No trumpet sounds. Still, this is preparation for battle. The woman tucks the needle back into its little cushion. She checks twice. A missing needle can pierce a foot, vanish into bedding, or cause an argument with the entire universe. Best to know where sharp things sleep. The boy stomps once to settle his foot into a shoe. The sound is dull on the packed floor. The girl ties her wrap beneath her chin. The youngest child sniffs and leans into the warmth while it remains available. You look at the quilts one last time, folded and waiting. They are not idle. They are storing heat, holding scent, keeping the shape of bodies that will return tired. When night comes, they will receive weight without complaint. For now, the room belongs to fabric, fire, and fingers. Every stitch has a purpose. Every layer holds a decision. Every patched place says that something torn does not have to be abandoned. Outside, wind moves along the cabin walls with its usual confidence. Inside, a woman pulls thread tight, snaps it clean, and presses the patch flat with her thumb. The cloth holds. So does the family. You step out into the winter morning, and the air meets you with a wet, grey chill. It is not the clean sparkle of a storybook frost. It is heavier than that, a damp cold that settles into cloth and asks personal questions of your bones. The sky hangs low over the Alabama fields. The ground is uneven beneath your shoes. Frozen places crack softly, while softer patches give way with a small sucking sound. Mud waits under thin frost like a trickster with excellent timing. One step feels firm. The next reminds you not to trust appearances. Around you, others move from nearby cabins, wrapped in whatever warmth they can carry. A shawl pulled tight, a cap pressed low, a patched coat closed with a cord. Breath rises in pale clouds, then disappears into the air as if embarrassed by being seen. The sound of mourning spreads across the yard. Doors open, feet scrape. A bucket knocks against a post. Someone coughs once, then twice. A mule stamps in a pen, irritated by winter and possibly by existence in general. The world wakes without gentleness. You follow the family toward the workground, where fields lie in dim rows. Cotton does not vanish from life when picking season ends. Winter brings clearing, ditching, repairing fences, tending livestock, hauling wood, and preparing soil for another year. The crop rests, but the system does not. That is the plain historical truth of this place. In 1845, Alabama's plantation economy depended on enslaved labor, especially cotton production. Winter work often supported the coming planting season. Roads, tools, fences, and fields required attention long before spring arrived with its green promises. A man carries an axe across one shoulder. Its head is dark and cold. A younger boy carries smaller wood pieces and tries not to stumble. The woman has tasks of her own, shaped by household needs, field demands, and commands that may shift without warning. The day has many mouths. You smell wet soil, smoke lingering in clothing, animal dung, and pine sap from cut timber. The scent is strong, not unpleasant exactly, but full of labour. It tells you that the world is made from earth, sweat, wood, and creatures with very little patience. An overseer's voice carries across the cold. It is not loud at first, but everyone hears it. Authority does not need to shout when people are trained to listen. The voice points bodies toward tasks. It slices the morning into duties. You feel the cabin warmth fading from your sleeves. It leaves gradually, first from fingers, then shoulders, then the small of the back. Soon, only memory remains. You understand why people moved carefully near the hearth. Warmth must be spent like coin. The man joins a group near a fence line. Rails have sagged where rain softened the ground. A fallen limb has broken one section. Cattle, hogs, or mules do not care about property boundaries when a gap appears. Animals are natural philosophers of escape. The work begins with lifting. Rail after rail. Heavy, rough, damp wood. Splinters catch at sleeves and skin. Frozen mud clings to boots. Hands grip, adjust, strain, release. The rhythm becomes steady, because rhythm is cheaper than comfort. You hear wood knock against wood. The sound is hollow and hard. A man exhales sharply as a rail settles into place. Another mutters something about the cold having teeth. Someone answers that the cold at least has no overseer, which earns a brief, dangerous smile. Gentle sarcasm survives even here. A woman passes nearby with a basket and hoe. She's going toward a patch where wintergreens may be tended, or perhaps toward another assigned job. Women's labour in enslaved communities could include field work, cooking, washing, childcare, spinning, sewing, nursing, and endless unrecorded tasks. Endless is not a poetic word here. It is nearly literal. The frost melts slowly where feet churn the path. Mud darkens the hems of garments. A child slips and catches himself with both hands. His palms come away cold and brown. He looks offended, as though the earth has behaved without manners. The older girl helps carry kindling toward a work shed. Her bundle is awkward, not impossibly heavy, but heavy enough. Small bodies were often expected to contribute early. Childhood existed, certainly, but it had to share space with labour, hunger, and instruction. You watch her shift the bundle against one hip. Her wrap loosens, and cold reaches her neck. She pauses, tucks the cloth tighter, and continues. No one praises the adjustment. The day is full of such cleverness, and most cleverness goes unannounced. A quirky detail appears near the woodpile. Someone has stuck an old horseshoe into a stump, not only as a place to hang a tool, but perhaps also as a bit of luck. Iron objects were often surrounded by practical and folk meanings. A horseshoe could hold a rope, scrape mud, or quietly argue with misfortune. Was that belief common here, or merely possible? Historians still debate how African spiritual traditions, European folk practices, and local plantation cultures blended in everyday objects. Evidence is uneven, because people under surveillance often protected their meanings carefully. Silence can be an archive, but it is difficult to read. The axe rises and falls, chips fly from a pine log, pale against the dark ground. Each strike sends a dull shock through arms and shoulders. The air fills with the bright smell of fresh resin. Pine sap glistens like amber tears, which is a rather dramatic performance for a tree. You notice how winter labour differs from summer labour. The body does not drown in heat, but it stiffens. Fingers lose feeling, then ache when feeling returns. Breath burns slightly in the chest. Sweat still comes, hidden under layers, making damp cloth colder during pauses. A man pauses to flex his hands. The cracked skin near his knuckles has reopened. A red line appears, quickly wiped away on coarse cloth. No one speaks of it. Work absorbs small injuries the way mud absorbs footprints. In another part of the field, several people clear brush from a ditch. Water must drain before planting. Poor drainage can rot roots, slow ploughing, and make fields stubborn. Ditching is cold work because wet earth clings to everything. The shovel enters with a thick sound. You walk beside them and feel the ground's resistance. Clay-heavy soil grips the blade. Roots tangle underneath. Dead leaves pack into the ditch like soggy paper. Each scoop is a negotiation. The earth does not sign quickly. The smell there is darker, full of standing water and rotted vegetation. It rises when the mud is opened. A frog, deeply offended by winter management, jumps from under a clump of grass. Someone laughs softly. Even a frog can become entertainment if the day is long enough. The overseer's horse moves along the field edge. Hooves make wet thuds. Leather creaks. Metal jingles. The horse tosses its head, warm breath steaming. It wears better winter protection than some people nearby, which feels impolite, though the horse is not to blame. You keep noticing sound, the scrape of shovel against root, the creak of the wagon wheels, the snap of a branch, the distant call of crows. Crows gather over a bare tree, black shapes against pale sky, commenting on human effort with the smugness of birds. At midday, if the word can be used for a brief pause, food appears from cloth bundles, corn cake, perhaps a little pork fat, perhaps cold sweet potato if fortune has visited. The meal is eaten with cold fingers. Nobody lingers long enough for romance. The boy bites into a hard edge of bread and chews slowly. His jaw works with concentration. A crumb sticks to his lip. He saves it with his tongue. Hunger teaches precision. Children learn not to waste even the small escapes. The woman drinks from a gourd dipper or shared vessel when water is available. The water tastes of wood, metal, and cold. It slides into the stomach like a stone. Still, it clears the throat of dust and smoke. There is conversation, but not too much. Words must fit the weather and the watching. Someone asks about a child cough. Someone answers with a shrug that is not indifference. It means worry has been noted, placed carefully inside, and not allowed to stop the hands. You feel how the family remains connected even while scattered among tasks. A glance crosses distance. A child is redirected with a chin movement. A man shifts a heavier piece of wood away from a smaller worker. These gestures travel under authorities' notice. Small boats on a dark river. The mainstream histories often count bales, acres, prices, and laws. Those things matter. Yet the day itself is made of smaller measurements. How long fingers can grip. How far a child can carry. How much warmth remains in a sleeve. How many words are safe to say. The afternoon light thins before it ever becomes golden. Winter days are short, and their shortness is another pressure. Work must be completed in limited light. Shadows stretch across fields where stubble and dead grass catch the wind. A wagon is loaded with wood. Each piece lands with a heavy thump. The wagon bed smells of old hay, damp boards, and animal sweat. A mule leans into its harness with patient misery. People and animals share the same grey hour, though not the same fate. The girl's hands redden from cold. She tucks them briefly beneath her arms, then reaches for the next load. Her face is set in a look too old for her years. Then a younger child makes a ridiculous noise with frozen lips, and she nearly smiles, nearly counts. You watch the man drive a wedge into a log. The wedge sticks halfway. He strikes again. A crack runs through the wood with a deep popping sound. The split opens suddenly, as though the log has finally admitted defeat. The sound pleases everyone nearby for half a breath. There is satisfaction in certain tasks, even inside injustice. A fence straightens, the log splits, a ditch clears, a tool holds. Human beings are built to feel the comfort of completed work. The cruelty lies in who controls the work, who profits, and who may rest. That distinction matters. The cold deepens as the sun lowers. Damp clothing begins to chill from the inside. Shoulders ache. Lower backs stiffen. The smell of smoke from distant chimneys becomes stronger, and everyone senses shelter before seeing it. The body recognizes home through the nose. The overseer's voice returns, directing the final movements of the day. Tools must be gathered, animals secured, loads carried. Nothing simply ends. Work has a tail, and it drags behind the evening. You walk along the path with mud clinging to your shoes. Each step pulls a little. The cabins appear ahead, low shapes beneath bare trees. Smoke rises from several chimneys in crooked lines. The sight is plain, but after cold labour, plain shelter looks almost magnificent. A child hurries despite tiredness, drawn by the thought of fire. An adult tells him not to run, because falling would only give Winter another joke. The child slows, but barely. Warmth has a strong argument, even stronger than blankets. The family reaches the door with hands stiff and clothes damp at the edges. The woman pauses outside to knock mud from her shoes. The man leans the tool where it belongs. The children shake themselves like small, serious animals. When the door opens, heat rolls out in a smoky breath. It is not abundant. It is not grand. Yet compared with the field, it feels like a gift wrapped in ash and stubborn flame. Your face warms first. Then your hands begin to ache as feeling returns. The room receives everyone without applause. That is its grace. There is no ceremony for survival returning at dusk. The hearth glows. The blankets wait. And the smell of corn and smoke begins to soften the hard edges of the day. You understand now that winter work does not simply happen outside the cabin. It enters with every body, every muddy hem, every cracked hand, every quiet sigh. The field follows people home, clinging to fabric and muscle. Still, as the door closes against the wind, the cabin pushes back. You come into the cabin with cold still clinging to your clothes, and the first thing you notice is smell. Food is not ready yet, but possibility has already entered the air. There is damp cornmeal, smoke, hot iron, a trace of onion, and the earthy scent of greens waiting to soften in the pot. The room feels crowded with hunger. Not loud hunger, not the dramatic kind that throws itself onto the floor. This is quieter. It sits behind the eyes, in the careful movement of hands, in the way children watch the hearth without meaning to stare. The woman sets a pot closer to the heat. Its black sides carry the shine of long use. The lid does not fit perfectly, so a little steam slips out in thin, fragrant threads. The pot gives a low bubbling sound, modest and patient. You feel warmth return painfully to your fingers. Cold leaving the body can be nearly as sharp as cold arriving. The skin prickles. The joints ache. You cup your hands near the fire, then pull them back before heat becomes sting. Winter enjoys complicated jokes. A child sits on the floor with a wooden bowl between both knees. He holds it as if it might flee. The older girl measures cornmeal by sight, not with a proper measuring cup. Her palm, her eye, and memory do the work. Exactness has many forms. In Alabama in 1845, enslaved families often depended on rations distributed by enslavers, supplemented by garden plots, hunting, fishing, gathering, barter, and careful saving. Cornmeal was a common staple. Pork appeared often enough in accounts. Though quality and amount varied widely, that uncertainty matters at supper. What did a family actually have on a given winter night? Historians continue to debate the average adequacy of rations, because records were shaped by owners, travellers, reformers, and later memory. A ledger can count pounds, but not worry. The woman opens a cloth bundle. Inside are dried peas, perhaps cowpeas, saved from warmer months. They roll against the bowl with a soft clicking sound. They look small, almost shy. Yet in winter, small foods can carry large hope. She checks them for stones with quick fingers. The child watches and tries to help. He finds one hard little pebble and holds it up proudly, as though he has defeated a mineral enemy. His mother nods. The pebble is removed with dignity. A funny thing about food in poor households is how many objects pretend to be food. Pebbles in peas, ash on cakes, grit in meal, a bit of leaf that looks suspiciously like dinner but is actually just leaf. The mouth becomes an investigator. The greens are dark and limp from cold storage. They might be collards, turnip greens, mustard greens, or wild gathered plants, depending on season and access. Their smell sharpens when they meet steam. It is green, bitter, mineral, and alive. You hear the knife on a board. Chop, pause, scrape. Chop, pause, scrape. The rhythm is gentler than field labour, but it is still labour. Supper is not a reward that appears because the day was hard. Someone must make it appear. The man sits near the door, scraping mud from a shoe with a sliver of wood. He does not bring the dirt too close to the hearth. Mud in food would be a poor seasoning, though history has served worse. He glances at the pot, then looks away. The girl mixes meal with water in a bowl. The mixture thickens under her hand. It clings between her fingers, cool at first, then warming as she works it. She presses it into cakes, each one flat and plain. The cakes are small, because the sack is not large. The youngest child asks whether there will be molasses. The room pauses by a hair. The woman says maybe another day, in a tone soft enough to cushion the answer. The child accepts this with the grave disappointment of someone betrayed by civilization. Molasses, when available, could brighten cornmeal, sweeten a drink, or give children a rare treat. It came from sugar production, itself tied to brutal labour in the wider Atlantic world. Even sweetness has a shadow. The spoon never tells the whole story. A bit of smoked meat, if present, is treated like treasure rather than main event. The woman cuts it into small pieces and lets it flavour the pot. The meat's salt moves through the greens and peas. The smell deepens, becoming warmer, rounder, more persuasive. You notice how seasoning is stretched. A little salt, a little fat, a smoky bone used more than once. Pepper if fortune and trade allow. Herbs from the rafters. Every flavour must travel far. Nothing is allowed to sit in one place being fancy. A quirky kitchen trick appears at the hearth. A clean stone, heated near the coals, may help warm a small covered vessel or keep food hot for a short time. People have used stones this way in many rural places. The stone is not glamorous, but it has excellent tendance. The fire gives the food its mood. Coals are pulled forward for the cakes. Flame is pushed back for the pot. Too much heat burns the bottom. Too little delays supper, which is dangerous when children have opinions. Managing a hearth is a quiet science. Smoke shifts downward suddenly and fills the room. Everyone blinks. The woman waves it aside with a cloth and mutters that the chimney has chosen foolishness. The man says the chimney comes by it honestly. A laugh moves through the room, quick and low. You feel your eyes water. The smoke tastes bitter on your tongue. It slips into the throat, scratches, then passes. The smell will settle into blankets and hair again. Smoke is the cabin's unwanted perfume, the kind nobody buys but everyone wears. The boy is sent to fetch water from a nearby source. He takes the bucket with both hands, because empty buckets are light and full buckets are sermons. The door opens, and cold enters boldly. He disappears into the grey edge of evening. For a moment, you sense the worry attached to even simple errands. Darkness comes early, paths are slick, rules govern movement. People look, notice, judge, command. Still, water must come. The household cannot wait for fear to become polite. The woman turns the corn cakes. Their undersides are browned and crisp. A warm, toasty smell rises. It is humble, but your stomach does not object. Hunger has never demanded fine porcelain. Hunger prefers punctuality. The girl wipes her hands on a cloth and checks the bowls. Wooden bowls, gourds, tin cups, a cracked plate saved for special use. Perhaps a spoon worn smooth from years of mouths. Tableware here is mixed, repaired, and personal. A favourite cup may be more valuable than it looks. The boy returns with water sloshing over the bucket rim. His sleeves are damp. His cheeks shine with cold. He tries to look unconcerned, but his fingers are red. The woman takes the bucket and gives him a look that says both hurry and thank you. She pours water into a smaller vessel and sets it near the fire. Some is for drinking, some may be for washing, some may be saved. Water has too many jobs and never enough leisure. It joins the long list of overworked residents. The pot begins to speak more actively. Bubbles push through greens and peas, lifting bits of meat and sinking them again. Steam fogs the air. The smell is no longer possibility. It is supper, and the children know it. You watch how portions are served, not carelessly, not equally in a simple way, because needs differ. A younger child gets softer food. A working adult may receive a little more bulk. Someone keeps back a portion for later. Love sometimes looks like difficult math. There is no rich spread, no gleaming table, no abundance arranged for admiration. There is a shared pot, warm hands, bent heads, and a room held together by hunger answered only partly. Yet partly is not nothing. Partly can keep a heart beating. The first bite is quiet. People blow across hot food, taste, and adjust to the heat. The greens are bitter and salty. The peas are soft but not luxurious. The corn cake is firm, with a crisp edge and a grainy middle. It fills the mouth honestly. The child chews too fast and is warned to slow down. He does not slow much. The body has its own arguments. The woman tears a small piece from her cake and places it into the youngest child's bowl without making a scene of it. You notice that gesture because it is easy to miss. Food moves quietly from one need to another. The child eats, unaware of the full meaning. The woman turns back to her bowl. This is not saintliness. This is parenting under pressure, which is harder and less decorative. The man dips corn cake into the pot liquor, the warm broth at the bottom. Pot liquor carries salt, minerals, greens, fat, and memory. It may be the richest part of the meal. A person who wastes it deserves a stern look from every grandmother in history. The room settles as food enters bodies. Shoulders lower. Children stop fidgeting for a little while. The fire crackles beside them, and outside the wind combs through bare branches. The cabin feels smaller, but in a comforting way, as though supper has pulled the walls inward. Someone mentions a neighbour who trapped a rabbit earlier in the week. Rabbit stew would be welcome, though welcome is an understatement. People trade small news about food the way others trade political rumours. Who has sweet potatoes left? Who found walnuts? Who knows where fish still gather? Fishing, hunting, and gathering could supplement enslaved diets when permitted or secretly practiced. Opossums, rabbits, squirrels, fish, nuts, berries, and wild greens appear in many accounts of rural southern foodways. These additions mattered deeply, though access depended on time, tools, location, and risk. The girl speaks of persimmons that dried on a branch until frost sweetened them. Her brother makes a face, claiming persimmons trick the mouth. Unripe ones certainly do. They can turn the tongue dry and puckered, as if the fruit has stolen every bit of moisture and left only regret. The woman smiles at that. She says ripe persimmons are worth patience. The statement seems to be about fruit, but perhaps not only fruit. Some sentences do double work here. They feed the mind while the pot feeds the body. A few crumbs fall onto the floor. The youngest child points them out. The boy retrieves one quickly and eats it. Nobody laughs too loudly, but several faces soften. Crumbs have status in a hungry house. They are not debris until everyone agrees. The pot is scraped carefully. A wooden spoon moves along the bottom with a slow rasp. Nothing burned, which is a relief. Burned food wastes both meal and mood. The woman adds a little water to loosen the last bits. Even the pot must be persuaded to give everything. You feel full enough to be warmer, though not full enough to be careless. That may be the common measure here. Enough warmth to continue, enough food to sleep, enough strength to rise, enough hope to mend itself overnight. The bowls are cleaned with small amounts of water and cloth. Grease is not wasted. Scraps may be saved for animals or the next pot. Ash may help scour. The work of eating becomes the work of cleaning, and the work of cleaning becomes preparation for the next hunger. The room smells richer now, carrying corn, greens, smoke, wet wool, and human breath. Steam has softened the air. The child with the cough sounds easier for a few minutes. The woman notices but does not trust relief too quickly. You look at the cornmeal sack, tied again and placed away from sparks. It is smaller now. That fact enters the room without a sound. There will be more meals, more measuring, more stretching, more hoping that garden stores and rations last. Still, supper has happened outside. Yes, the winter wind continues its long complaint. Inside, the fire lowers into a gentler glow. The family sits with bowls emptied, fingers warmed, and hunger quieted enough to let conversation breathe. Simple food has not made life easy. It has made this hour possible. You hold the hour softly. You sit close enough to the hearth to feel heat along your knees, while the room changes into evening. Supper has quieted the sharpest edge of hunger, and now another need rises gently. It is the need to belong somewhere, even in a world determined to make belonging difficult. The fire has settled into a steady red glow. Flames move lower than they did at cooking time, no longer leaping for attention. Coals shine through ash like buried fruit. The room breathes more slowly now, and every face seems softer in the amber light. Outside, the wind moves across the yard and slips through the cracks with its usual nosiness. It rattles the shutter, then withdraws, then returns again, as though winter has forgotten where it left something. The cabin walls answer with small creaks and tired patience. Inside, people begin the work of being family. That work is quieter than chopping wood or stirring a pot, but it is no less real. A child leans against an older shoulder. A man stretches his hands toward the heat. The woman folds cloth over her lap, preparing some small mending by firelight. You notice the sound of thread pulled through fabric. It is almost hidden beneath the fire, but once heard, it becomes steady. A soft hiss, a tiny tug, a pause while fingers search for the needle point. Evening has its own tools. The girl sits with her knees drawn up, watching the older hands. She's old enough to know that rest can include work. That is one of the less charming lessons of history. Still, her eyes are bright with the fire's reflection, and she listens closely. The youngest child sits on a blanket, rubbing sleep from one eye with a fist. He's fighting drowsiness with poor technique. Every few breaths, his head dips, then jerks upright. Pride keeps him awake. Pride is a terrible pillow. The man begins to speak in a low voice. Not a sermon voice, not a field voice. This is a cabin voice, meant to travel only as far as the people gathered near the hearth. It carries through smoke, shadow, and the quiet attention of children. He tells of a raccoon that once stole from a corn patch and left tracks so clear that even a blind mule might have followed them. The boy laughs at that, because insulting mules is generally safe comedy. The man says the raccoon had better manners than some people, since it took only what it could carry. The woman snorts softly without looking up. She says the raccoon likely had a larger sense of property than the people who claimed the field. The line arrives gently, wrapped in humour, but its edge is sharp enough. Nobody laughs loudly. The children hear more than they are told. Storytelling among enslaved families and communities carried history, humour, warning, instruction, and spiritual strength. Tales of clever animals, especially tricksters, connected African traditions with new American settings. The stories changed as they travelled, because living stories have legs. A quirky little figure slips into the room through words. Brer Rabbit, or a rabbit like him, may not always win by strength, but he survives by wit. A small creature uses pride, timing, and foolishness against bigger creatures. Children enjoy the mischief. Adults may enjoy the code. Scholars still debate how particular trickster tales moved across African, Caribbean, indigenous, and southern oral traditions. The paths are not always clear, because oral culture rarely leaves neat footprints. A tale might belong to many roads at once, which seems fitting for a trickster. The man leans back, eyes half closed, and lets the raccoon become cleverer with every sentence. The animal slips past a dog, fools a watchman, and steals corn from under the moon. Each escape grows less believable, which is the proper direction for a good evening story. The boy interrupts with a question. Could a raccoon open a latch? The man says this raccoon could probably sign a receipt. The girl says no raccoon would be foolish enough to admit anything in writing. The woman says some humans could learn from that raccoon. The fire pops, approving the legal discussion. You feel laughter move through the cabin in small, careful waves. It does not erase weariness, it loosens it. Shoulders drop, mouths curve. A child forgets the cold draft at his back. Humour becomes a blanket no one can confiscate easily. Near the wall, a small homemade instrument rests on a peg or shelf. Perhaps a fiddle if luck and skill have allowed one, or a simpler rhythm tool made from bone, wood, or gourd. Music did not require wealth. It required breath, hands, memory, and courage. The woman begins a soft hum while she sews. At first it's almost nothing, just a line of sound under the room. The melody rises and falls slowly, not bright enough for dancing, not mournful enough for tears. It seems to rock the air. The girl joins with a second tone. The notes do not fit perfectly by strict music book rules, but strict music books are not in charge here. The blend is warm and slightly rough, like a woven cloth with honest knots. The youngest child leans toward it. You hear the atmosphere change. The cabin becomes less a structure and more an instrument. Logs hold the sound. The pot lid hums faintly when touched by vibration. Smoke rises through the chimney. Wind passes outside like a distant listener pretending not to care. Music among enslaved people in the American South included work songs, spirituals, lullabies, ring shouts, and private family melodies. These forms preserved memory, shaped worship, coordinated labour, soothed children, and carried meanings that outsiders did not always understand. The woman's hum shifts into words, but softly. The song speaks of home, rest, crossing, and morning light. It does not need to name every sorrow to carry it. Sometimes the gentlest song holds the heaviest things because it refuses to drop them. The man taps 2 fingers against his knee. A simple beat appears. The boy copies it against the floor too loudly at first. The woman gives him 1 glance. He reduces his volume with remarkable speed. Domestic percussion meets maternal authority, and authority wins. The rhythm settles. Tap. Pause. Tap. Thread moves through cloth. A child breathes. The fire settles lower. You feel the scene deepen, not because anything grand happens, but because everyone has entered the same shared pocket of time. This is family by firelight, not perfect, not untouched by fear, not painted in false sweetness. It is a gathering made from people who may be separated by work, watched by authority, and strained by hunger, yet still create a circle of recognition. The man reaches toward the youngest child and gently pulls the blanket higher around his shoulders. The gesture interrupts neither song nor story. It is done as naturally as breathing. The child accepts it without thanks, because children are royalty in matters of blankets. A small joke passes between the older children about who took the largest corn cake. The accused party denies everything with deep seriousness. The evidence is unfortunately gone. The family court cannot proceed. Everyone agrees the case is suspicious. You notice the woman smile while looking down at her sewing. It is a tired smile, but real. The firelight gathers in the fine lines near her eyes. Her hands keep moving. Needle, thread, cloth, pull. Her rest is braided with responsibility. The cabin smells different now than at supper. The sharp scent of greens has faded. Smoke, warm fabric, banked coals, and damp shoes dominate the air. There is also the faint sweetness of corn left on the pan, a soft memory of food. The boy asks for another story. Of course he does. Children have always understood that tired adults are vulnerable to requests made near bedtime. The man says his stories are worn out. The boy says worn stories are the best kind, because they already know where to go. That earns a real laugh. The woman begins instead, her voice lower than the man's and smoother in rhythm. She tells of a woman who could braid so tightly that gossip got caught in the hair and could not escape. The girl giggles. The boy looks puzzled, then offended that gossip might have physical form. The tale becomes a lesson about loose talk, listening walls, and careful tongues. It is funny enough for children and serious enough for adults. In communities under surveillance, a speech could be dangerous. A story could teach caution without sounding like fear. You feel the cleverness of oral teaching. A child remembers a comic image more easily than a warning. Gossip trapped in braids may save someone from repeating the wrong thing in the wrong place. Humour carries instruction softly, like a cup passed in the dark. The youngest child finally loses his battle against sleep. His head drops against the folded blanket. His mouth opens slightly. The woman notices at once and shifts him gently onto bedding near the fire's safer warmth. He murmurs, then disappears into dreams. The song returns for a few breaths, quieter now. The girl watches the sleeping child and lowers her own voice. The boy does not, until corrected by another glance. Glances do extraordinary work here. Entire speeches live inside them. The man speaks of kin on another place. Maybe not far in miles, but far in permission. Family networks among enslaved people often crossed plantations, estates, and farms. Visits, marriages, parenthood, and memory had to survive sale, distance, passes, patrols, and forced schedules. The room grows still around that topic. Kinship can warm, but it can also ache. A name spoken by firelight may belong to someone absent, someone sold away, someone living just beyond reach. The children know some names as stories more than faces. The woman repeats one name softly, as if testing whether the room can hold it safely. It can. For a moment, the fire seems to dim around the sound. Then the man adds a small memory, something about a laugh, a hat, a song, or a habit of seasoning food too boldly. The memory makes the absent person briefly present. That is one of memory's tender tricks. It does not restore what was taken. It makes refusal out of forgetting. The family sits with that, and the room becomes fuller than its walls. You feel the atmosphere thicken with smoke and feeling. It is not heavy enough to crush. It is heavy enough to matter. Outside, the wind scrapes along the logs, but inside, names, jokes, songs, and stitches build another kind of shelter. The girl asks whether people remember babies who grew up elsewhere. The woman answers that blood remembers, and so do songs. The man says faces may fade, but ways of laughing sometimes travel further. Nobody speaks for several breaths. Then the boy, unable to respect solemnity for too long, asks whether a raccoon remembers its cousins. The man says a raccoon remembers only where food is hidden. The woman says that may be more than some people remember. The room exhales. A small ember collapses in the hearth. Sparks rise and disappear. The sound draws everyone's eyes for one shared second. Fire is always a little performance. Even when no one admits watching, its movements are never exactly repeated. The mending is nearly finished. The woman ties off thread and bites it clean. The girl folds the repaired piece. The man rubs one hand over his knee, as though easing ache from the joint. The boy stares into the coals, caught between imagination and sleep. You sit among them and understand that the cabin's warmth is social as much as physical. Fire heats the air, but family gives the heat meaning. A lonely hearth is only a warm place. A shared hearth becomes a memory-making machine. The stories have not made the world kind. The songs have not broken the system outside. The jokes have not filled the meal sack. Yet each one has guarded something essential from being consumed. Dignity, tenderness, wit, and memory remain awake. The wind rises once more, pushing cold along the wall. The woman reaches without looking and adjusts the hanging cloth near the crack. The song has ended, but its shape lingers. The youngest child sleeps. The older children lean closer. The man lowers his voice again. Another tale begins, softer than the first, meant for ears already drifting. You listen as the raccoon returns under moonlight, clever, hungry, and entirely too pleased with himself. The children smile in the fire glow. For now, the cabin holds laughter carefully, like one more coal saved beneath ash. You remain near the hearth as the evening grows quieter, and the family's words begin to change their weight. Laughter has not disappeared, but it folds itself smaller. The room does not become sad exactly. It becomes listening, as if the walls understand that softer things are coming. The fire burns low with a red patience. Ash gathers around the coals in pale ridges. When a stick shifts, a small light opens inside it, then closes again. The cabin smells of warm dust, smoke, old cloth, and the faint herbal sharpness from bundles above the hearth. Outside, the wind has settled into a steady moan through the trees. It moves past the roof and door like water around stones. Every now and then, a gust presses the walls hard enough to make the hanging cloth stir. The candle, if one has been lit, keeps its flame small. The woman reaches for a small bundle of leaves. She rubs them between her fingers and drops them into hot water. The scent rises bitter and green. It may be meant for the youngest child's cough, or for tired throats, or simply for the comfort of warm liquid. A remedy does not need to perform miracles to matter. You watch steam curl over the cup. It wets the air near the woman's face. The child takes a sip and frowns with deep betrayal. Medicine has always been accused of poor manners. The woman murmurs that bitter things can still help. That statement lingers. In 1845 Alabama, many enslaved families relied on both formal and informal spiritual practices for comfort, strength, and identity. Christianity was widespread in different forms, but it often mingled with older African traditions, local customs, remembered songs, and private meanings protected from outside control. You feel that layered faith in the room. It does not sit neatly on a shelf. It moves through song fragments, whispered petitions, quiet gestures, herbs, dreams, and names spoken carefully. It is not merely belief. It is a way of keeping the self from being claimed entirely. The man lowers his head. The children respond almost at once, not because anyone commands them loudly, but because the mood tells them. The woman sets her sewing aside. Hands become still. Even the boy, usually suspicious of stillness, folds himself into silence. A prayer begins in a voice hardly above breath. The words are simple, asking for protection through the night, strength for the body, mercy for the sick, and memory for those separated by distance. The prayer does not decorate suffering. It carries it plainly. You hear no grand church organ, no polished pews, no clean windows bright with coloured glass. There is only a dirt floor, a hearth, patched blankets, and low voices, yet the room feels solemn. Holiness, apparently, does not require expensive furniture, quite practical of it. The girl closes her eyes tightly. Perhaps she is praying. Perhaps she is trying not to sleep. Perhaps both. Children often enter sacred moments through doors adults do not notice. Her hands rest on her knees, fingers curled into the cloth of her skirt. The youngest child coughs softly. The woman's eyes open at once, then close again. Prayer does not stop her from listening as a mother. It may sharpen the listening. Faith and worry sit beside each other without embarrassment. The man's voice shifts into a remembered line from a hymn. He does not sing fully yet. He touches the melody, as if checking whether it is safe. The woman joins with a hum. The sound is low enough to remain inside the room, but deep enough to fill it. Spiritual songs among enslaved communities often carried multiple layers. They could express Christian hope, communal sorrow, coded longing for freedom, and trust in deliverance beyond immediate circumstances. Outsiders might hear piety. Insiders could hear much more. Historians still argue about how often particular songs carried coded messages in daily life. Some accounts strongly suggest hidden meanings, while other claims grew larger in later memory. The safest truth is also the richest one. Songs could hold many meanings at once. The melody moves slowly, not for performance, but for breath. The notes rise, hover, and fall. You feel them in your chest more than your ears. The fire answers with soft cracks. The wind outside becomes a second, rougher instrument. A quirky little detail appears in the way the boy taps his thumb against his palm during the song. It is barely visible. Perhaps he's keeping rhythm. Perhaps he's counting. Some people use body rhythm, clapping, foot taps, or patting juba to create music when drums were restricted or discouraged. The body became its own hidden drum. That thought settles gently. A person may be denied objects, yet still carry rhythm in bones and breath. The boy's thumb continues. Tap, rest, tap. It is small, but it keeps time against the night. The woman's voice grows slightly clearer. She sings of crossing water, of burdens laid down, of a morning that no earthly master can schedule. The words are old and new at once. The children know enough to follow, though their voices drift in and out. You feel the power of future tense in the room. Will be, shall come, going home, seeing again, resting soon. These are not casual grammar choices. They are shelters built in language, places where the spirit can visit when the body cannot go. The man's face remains lowered, but his jaw tightens once. Perhaps he thinks of someone sold away. Perhaps he thinks of a parent, a child, a wife, a brother, a friend. The cabin cannot tell you everything. Respect sometimes means not forcing the silence to explain itself. The song ends without a flourish. It simply returns to breath. For a few moments, just no one moves. The fire's red light makes the rafters appear higher than they are. Smoke has darkened the beams over years. Dried herbs hang like little shadows. The room feels suspended between earthly cold and something less easily named. Then the woman lifts her head and speaks of a dream. Not loudly, not dramatically. She says she saw a road under bright weather, and people walking without fear. She does not claim the dreamer's prophecy. She does not dismiss it either. Dreams deserve manners. They may have travelled far. Dreams held importance in many cultures, including African diasporic communities, where they could be interpreted as messages, warnings, memories, or spiritual visits. Under slavery, a dream might offer emotional truth when daily life denied ordinary certainty. It could be private freedom, even if morning returned. The girl asks whether dreams can find people who live far away. The woman says dreams know paths that feet cannot take. The man says dreams also wander into nonsense if a person eats too quickly. This preserves balance, which all serious households require. The boy asks whether a dream can carry food. The woman says if it could, she would sleep much more often. The children laugh softly. Even Hope is allowed to wear a small joke. Perhaps especially Hope. You feel the cabin loosen again. The prayer has not vanished. It has moved into the corners, where it keeps company with smoke and stored warmth. The family returns to ordinary gestures. But ordinary gestures now seem lightly touched by something larger. The woman gives the bitter drink to the coughing child again. He obeys reluctantly. His face folds into a small tragedy. The older children show him no sympathy, because they have survived bitter drinks and believe suffering should be shared fairly. Near the hearth, the man takes a little ash and arranges the coals for a slow burn. Banking the fire is a practical act, but tonight it feels symbolic. Preserve the heat, cover it enough to last, trust that something red remains under grey. You understand why that image matters. The family's hopes are not spoken in full. Full speech can be dangerous, and some dreams are too tender for open air. Yet they appear in fragments. A wish to visit kin, a desire for a child to learn letters, a longing for a day when no pass is needed to walk a road. In Alabama at this time, laws and customs often restricted enslaved people's literacy, movement, assembly, and family autonomy. Still, people pursued learning, worship, love, and communication through hidden or permitted channels. Restriction shaped life, but did not define the whole human being. The girl traces letters in ash near the hearth with one careful finger. Perhaps she knows a few. Perhaps she only copies shapes once seen on a scrap or sign. The woman sees and does not scold. The man watches the door, then looks back. The marks are quickly smoothed away. That tiny action holds more drama than a thunderstorm. A letter can be dangerous here. It can also be a key. Historians debate how many enslaved children learned pieces of reading or writing informally, because such learning was often hidden and rarely recorded honestly. The girl's face gives away nothing. She lowers her hand and listens to the fire. You imagine the shape of the erased mark still glowing somewhere invisible. Not every trace needs to remain on the floor to remain in the mind. The man speaks of a scripture story, not by reading, but by remembering. Moses, Pharaoh, wilderness, water, wandering, deliverance. The tale is ancient and travels well. It has crossed deserts, oceans, churches, hush harbours, cabins, and tired mouths. Hush harbours, secret or secluded worship gatherings among enslaved people, appear in many later accounts. Some met in woods, ravines, or hidden places beyond direct white supervision. Scholars still examine how widespread and varied these gatherings were, because secrecy was part of their protection. Tonight, worship stays inside the cabin. The walls hold the words. The children hear of a people walking out from bondage, though the story is wrapped carefully enough for young ears. The boy asks whether the sea was cold. Practical child? Good question. The man says cold enough to hurry through. Likely. The woman says no one complains about wet feet during a miracle. This seems reasonable. The girl smiles. The youngest child, almost asleep, whispers that he would still complain. The room laughs quietly, and the laughter does not weaken the story. It makes it human. Sacred stories survive better when people can imagine their own cold toes inside them. Grandeur needs a little mud to be trusted. The wind fades for a while. In that pause, you hear the night beyond the cabin more clearly. A dog barks far away. Another answers, somewhere. A branch falls with a soft thud. The world is wide and dark around this small square of warmth. The woman begins another hum, slower now, almost a lullaby. It has no hurry. It circles the sleeping child and brushes the edges of everyone's tiredness. The melody seems to make the blankets heavier. Your eyelids feel it too. The man sits with elbows on knees, looking into the coals. His face is thoughtful, but not defeated. That distinction matters. The fire paints his cheekbones and brow. The lines of labour remain, but so does inwardness, that private room no owner can fully enter. You sense the family's dreams collecting quietly. They are not loud banners. They are hidden seeds. A child learning one letter, a mother saving a scrap, a father remembering a story of freedom. A family singing low while winter listens outside. The bitter herbal smell softens as the cup cools. The child's cough eases, then returns once, lighter. The woman notices. Hope comes in small measurements here. One easier breath, one safe night, one remembered name, one coal still red beneath ash. You sit in the dimness and let the room speak without explaining. Faith here is not escape from history. It is one way of surviving history with the soul intact. Hope is not foolishness. It is disciplined tenderness, kept alive in dangerous weather. The coals deepen to crimson. The prayer has become silence. The song has become breath. The erased ash letters have become memory. Outside, the wind resumes its long wandering voice, but it sounds farther away now. Inside, the family keeps a quiet flame. You hear the first signal as a soft knock that is almost swallowed by the wind. It does not sound like a stranger's knock. It is lighter, spaced with care, as though the knuckles know the door and the danger of noise. Everyone inside the cabin looks up. For one breath, nothing moves except firelight. The woman's hand pauses over the cup. The man turns his head toward the door, listening beyond the knock. The children become very still. Even the smallest child seems to sense that silence has the rules. Then the knock comes again. The man rises and crosses the room without haste. Haste attracts attention, and attention is often expensive. He lifts the latch and opens the door only wide enough for a face, a shoulder, and a rush of bitter air. A neighbour steps in, wrapped in dark cloth and carrying the smell of frost. Cold enters with him, sharp and wet. It moves across the floor, touches ankles, and reaches greedily toward the hearth. Someone pulls a blanket tighter. The door closes quickly, and the cabin begins recovering its warmth like a person catching breath. The neighbour is an older woman, or perhaps she only seems older because winter and work are unkind artists. Her cheeks are hollowed by cold. Her eyes are lively. She carries a small bundle under one arm, wrapped in cloth and tied with a strip of rag. She speaks in a low voice, greeting each person by name. Names matter here. They are not decorations. They are cords stretched between cabins, tying people into a net of memory and obligation. To say a name softly is to recognize a life, The woman of the cabin takes the bundle and opens it near the hearth. Inside are a few dried beans, a twist of thread, and a small heel of something hard and dark. It may be dried sweet potato, a piece of smoked meat, or a bit of medicinal root. Whatever it is, it has travelled with purpose. The visiting woman says the child's cough sounded worse earlier. She says this without ceremony, as if bringing help were as ordinary as breathing. The woman near the hearth nods and accepts the offering. Gratitude is present, but it does not need a parade. This is how neighbouring works under pressure. In plantation quarters, enslaved families often relied on networks of mutual help. People shared food, tools, childcare, healing knowledge, news, and emotional support whenever they could. Such aid helped communities survive systems designed to isolate, control, and exhaust them. You watch the older woman remove her wrap and hold her hands near the fire. Her fingers are bent slightly from work and cold. She rubs them together, then laughs softly at their stiffness. She says her hands have become two old possums, slow and suspicious. The boy grins at that. The girl hides her smile behind her shoulder. Possums are funny animals, partly because they look as if they have heard troubling news. The older woman knows this and uses it well. A small object appears from her pocket, and the children lean closer. It is a button made from bone or shell, smooth and pale. One hole is chipped. She says she found it near the wash place. Nobody knows whose garment lost it, which means naturally. Everyone may argue politely over its future. Buttons were small treasures in households where clothing was repaired again and again. A button could close a shirt, fasten a child's coat, decorate a doll, or sit in a child's hand like a tiny moon. Ordinary objects become interesting when scarcity gives them a stage. The girl accepts it only after the women agree it should be kept in the scrap basket. Her face is careful, but pleased. The button has no grand value in a market. In this room, it becomes one more possibility with edges worn by human use. The older woman asks about the day's work. The man answers briefly. Fence rails, ditch mud, timber, stubborn ground. She nods, because she understands each word in her body. People who share labour do not require lengthy explanations. A few nouns can carry an entire ache. She brings news from another cabin. A baby has cut a tooth. A man's foot is swollen. Someone found a hen hiding eggs in a ridiculous place. That last piece of information improves the atmosphere immediately. Hens, like children, enjoy making adults look foolish. The woman of the cabin says a hen with secrets should be watched closely. The older woman says the hen has more sense than the rooster, which surprises nobody. The boy laughs too loudly, and both women quiet him with matching looks. Neighbourly discipline has arrived. You feel the cabin expand without becoming larger. Another body, another voice, another set of memories changes the room. The firelight now touches more stories. The air smells of cold wool thawing, smoke, herbs, and the faint outdoor scent carried in the visitor's wrap. A low call rises from outside. Not a warning, just someone passing between cabins. The man listens until the sound fades. Movement at night is never completely simple. People might be allowed small visits, or might move quietly beyond permission. The rules depend on place, power, and mood. Historians still debate how much informal visiting was tolerated across different plantations and small farms. Some enslavers permitted evening gatherings within limits, while others restricted them severely. People still found ways to exchange help, worship, courtship, and news, because human life refuses to fit inside ledgers. The older woman asks for a coal, not a dramatic request, a practical one. Her fire has gone low, or perhaps a neighbour's hearth needs relighting. The woman of the cabin reaches for a small shovel or broken iron piece and lifts a live coal from the edge of the hearth. It glows red under its grey coat. The coal is placed into a covered container with ash around it. It must be carried carefully. A coal can save time, kindling, and cold fingers. It can also burn cloth, spill sparks, and create one more problem. Fire is helpful, but it is not well behaved. The image stays with you, one household carrying fire to another, warmth travelling through darkness in a little guarded bed of ash. It is a simple thing, and yet it feels enormous. Community sometimes begins as the question, is your fire still alive? The younger child watches the coal with solemn fascination. He asks whether it is sleeping. The older woman says it is pretending, which is different. That answer satisfies him completely. Children appreciate expert testimony about fire. A small pouch is exchanged next. It contains seeds, perhaps saved from summer greens or a garden patch. Seeds in winter are promises so small they seem almost ridiculous, dry, hard, and quiet. They wait for warmth that has not arrived. Hope has many tiny forms. Garden plots were important for many enslaved families when allowed. People grew vegetables, herbs, and sometimes small crops for food or trade. These plots could provide nutrition, pride, and a measure of control within brutal limits. Soil near a cabin might become a family's private argument with hunger. The two women discuss where certain seeds might do better. One patch holds too much water, another gets more morning sun. A third place has good soil, but chickens have apparently formed political opinions about it. The chickens are not expected to respect boundaries. This conversation is ordinary and profound at once. It is about planting, but also about time. To save seeds in winter is to imagine living into spring. To discuss soil is to claim some future labour for your own household, however narrow the claim may be. The man repairs a small handle while they speak. A tool is split at one end, and he wraps it with cord. The older woman watches his hands and suggests a tighter twist. He tries it. The cord bites into the wood more firmly. He nods. Knowledge moves sideways in this room, and not from master to subject, not from book to student, but from hand to hand. A way of tying, a cough remedy, a planting hint, a story of a road patrol, a warning about a temper. Information becomes shelter. The boy is sent to fetch a small clay jar from the shelf. He lifts it carefully, aware that dropping it would make him famous in the worst way. Inside is a little grease or salve. The older woman needs some for a cracked heel in another cabin. A bit is scraped into a leaf. The exchange is not equal in a tidy account book sense. Beans, coal, salve, thread, news, laughter, advice. They move in many directions. A community keeps its own memory of balance. Not every debt is counted aloud, which is wise, because ledgers have a chilling personality. You hear footsteps outside again, then a whisper at the wall. Another neighbour does not enter, but asks through the door whether a spare needle can be borrowed by morning. The woman freezes for a second, because needles matter. Then she reaches for the pincushion. One needle is selected with caution. The borrower promises return. Everyone understands the seriousness. A needle is tiny, but in a world of torn cloth and cold weather, it is a tool of survival. Losing it would be socially dangerous, possibly spiritually embarrassing. The older woman mutters that needles have legs. The man says they walk straight into feet. The children immediately check the floor with alarm. The adults pretend not to enjoy this. Very dignified. All of them. The door opens briefly. The needle is passed into a waiting hand. A face appears only as shadow and breath, then disappears. The door shuts. Cole tries to rush inside again and fails partly. The cabin reclaims its air. You sense how many lives are near in the darkness. Cabins stand apart, yet their people are not alone. Somewhere, another child coughs. Somewhere, a woman scrubs a pot. Somewhere, someone whispers a name from far away. The night is full of hidden rooms. Community here is fragile because it can be disrupted by sale, punishment, illness, distance, and the demands of labour. Yet fragile does not mean weak. A spider web is fragile until a fly learns otherwise. These ties hold because people keep remaking them. The older woman finishes warming her hands. She rises slowly, wrapping herself again. The coal container is ready. The bundle has been emptied of gifts and filled with return items. A little salve, a repaired strip, perhaps a share of warm food if the pot allows. The woman of the cabin presses the bundle closed. Their hands meet around it for a moment. No speech is needed. The gesture holds thanks, worry, kinship, and the knowledge that another need will come soon enough. That is how life works. It is needy. Before leaving, the older woman bends toward the coughing child and hums 2 notes. The child smiles faintly. She touches his forehead with the back of her hand, then nods. It is not a cure, it is recognition. The door opens. The wind enters again, carrying the smell of wet leaves and night soil. The older woman steps out with the guarded coal. For one moment, the red light glows inside her container like a secret star. Then the door closes behind her. The cabin seems quieter after she leaves, but not emptier. Her presence remains in the beans, the button, the advice, the laugh about possum hands. The borrowed needle is gone, but trust has crossed the yard in its place. That feels important. The man settles the latch and listens once more. All is ordinary outside, which means safe enough for now. He returns to the hearth. The woman adds the shared beans to a small container and ties the seed pouch carefully. The girl touches the pale button with one finger. You feel the web of neighbouring all around you now. It stretches through cold air, past watchful eyes, across mud paths, and into small rooms where fires need tending. It is made from quiet knocks, borrowed tools, shared remedies, and jokes low enough not to travel far. The winter wind keeps speaking beyond the walls, inside. Warmth is no longer only what the cabin keeps. It is also what the cabin gives, receives, and passes along through the night. You sit with the family as the night deepens and the cabin begins to show its 2 faces. One face is tender, filled with warmth, low voices, and the dull red comfort of coals. The other face is watchful, turned toward every sound beyond the door. Winter does not bring only cold. The air feels thick now, softened by breath and smoke. Blankets have been shifted closer to sleeping places. The youngest child lies wrapped near the hearth, though safely away from sparks. His cough has quieted for the moment. That small mercy changes the room more than anyone says. Outside, the yard is dark except for the faint glow from other hearths, leaking through shutters or roof gaps. Wind moves through the pines with a dragging sound. It could be branches. It could be footsteps. At night, the mind becomes a very talented liar. The man sits near the door with a tool in his hand, not working much now, only holding it. His posture is relaxed enough for the children, but not truly relaxed. You notice the listening again. It lives in the shoulders, in the turned ear, in the pause after every distant noise. The woman folds a blanket over her lap and watches the fire. Her face is calm, but calm can be a practiced garment. She has children to steady, food to manage, bodies to protect, and tomorrow already waiting outside with muddy boots. Fear, if present, must sit quietly. In Alabama in 1845, enslaved people lived under a system of laws, custom, patrols, and violence designed to control movement and labour. Night could bring rare privacy, but it could also bring inspection, punishment, forced interruption, or the news no family wanted to hear. You feel that uncertainty press against the cabin walls. The room is warm, but not sealed from power. A home can be loved and still not fully secure. That truth is painful, and it sits near the hearth like an uninvited guest nobody dares insult directly. A dog barks somewhere outside and everyone pauses. Bark comes again, then fades into a lower growl. The boy looks toward the man, waiting to learn what the sound means. The man keeps his face steady. Children study adult faces the way sailors study clouds. Nothing follows. The boy lets out his breath slowly, pretending he was not holding it. The girl notices and gives him a tiny look. He frowns back. Sibling pride returns quickly when danger proves imaginary. Very efficient, these little household governments. The woman reaches into a small basket and takes out a carved bit of wood. It is a simple toy, perhaps a small animal, perhaps only a shape smoothed by handling. She passes it to the youngest child when he wakes enough to fuss. His fingers close around it. Small joys often live in objects like that. A cornhusk doll, a carved scrap, a button, a smooth stone, a bit of string twisted into a game. Toys did not need shops to exist. Children have always been gifted at turning almost anything into an entire kingdom. The child studies the wooden shape in the firelight. He decides it is a horse. The boy says it looks more like a tired dog. The girl says both of them are wrong, because it is obviously a mule with opinions. This judgment seems final. A little laughter rises, quieter than earlier, but welcome. It softens the fearful edge left by the barking dog. The man allows the corner of his mouth to lift. The woman shakes her head, amused despite herself. The wooden mule with opinions has performed a useful service. A quirky tidbit hides in the children's play. Corncobs could become dolls, boats, animals, pipes for adults, or counting pieces for games. A corncob is not naturally glamorous, but it is versatile. It also looks faintly ridiculous, which improves many evenings. The girl begins a hand game with the boy, using claps so soft they barely sound. Palm, back, pause, tap. Their rhythm is restrained, because noise travels. The game has the riddles you do not fully catch. The boy breaks one, immediately denies it, and is immediately convicted. Children's games in enslaved communities could echo African, European, and indigenous influences, changing across regions and generations. Historians still debate the origins of particular rhythms, rhymes, and play forms, because children rarely leave written records, and adults often overlook play until it vanishes. Yet play is not trivial here. It gives children practice in timing, memory, teasing, cooperation, and controlled rebellion. It teaches the body that joy can appear even when permission has not been granted. That lesson is quietly radical. The fire dims, and the woman adds one small stick. Not a large one. Wood must last. The new flame lifts, revealing faces more clearly. Shadows jump along the wall, and for a moment the children's hand game looks enormous, their clapping silhouettes moving like birds. The man speaks of weather signs. He says the wind turning from one direction may bring rain by morning. The woman says his knee predicts weather more confidently than the sky. He admits the knee has been right often enough to deserve respect. Weather mattered deeply in rural life. Cold rain could delay field work, worsen illness, flood paths, and soak clothing that might not dry quickly. A hard freeze could damage stored food or trouble animals. Forecasting by clouds, wind, pain, and animal behaviour was practical knowledge. The boy asks whether crows know when rain is coming. The man says crows know everything and share nothing useful. This feels unfair, but crows have built a reputation. The girl says crows laugh at people. The woman says people often make it easy. The room relaxes again. Then hooves sound in the distance. They are faint at first, almost lost in wind. One hoof beat, then another, then the dull rhythm of a horse moving along wet ground. The man's face changes only slightly. The woman places one hand on the blanket beside her. The children become quiet so quickly it hurts. The hoofbeats continue, then slow. You feel the air in the cabin tighten. The fire seems louder suddenly. A coal breaks with a soft tick. Someone outside speaks, too far away to understand. Another voice answers. The horse moves again. The sound passes. No one celebrates. They simply remain still until the rhythm fades completely. Fear takes time to leave the body. It does not obey reason at once. It lingers in fingers, throat, and belly, checking whether the danger has truly gone. The youngest child, half asleep, asks whether the horse has gone. The woman says yes, gentle and firm. The child accepts this because her voice has made the world smaller and safer. That is one of the secret powers of a trusted voice. The man looks toward the fire and exhales. Not a sigh exactly. More like setting down something heavy without letting it hit the floor. The girl resumes her hand game, but slower now. The boy follows, careful not to ask questions he may not want answered. You understand the family's fear not as constant panic, but as a readiness that never fully sleeps. It has been trained into daily life. It is the habit of listening before laughing, lowering voices after dark, smoothing ash over letters, and knowing where everyone is. Yet the cabin also refuses to be only afraid. The woman begins a small game with the children, asking them to name something warm. The boy says fire, the girl says soup, the youngest child says blanket. The man says a mule's opinion, which makes no sense, and therefore succeeds. The boy protests that opinions are not warm. The woman says some opinions are very heated. That settles it. The game continues. Sun on a fence rail. A hand around a cup. A cat asleep if one wanders in from the yard. A pocket with a roasted sweet potato. A baby's head. A chimney stone after supper. The answers become softer, slower, sweeter. You feel the room heal itself in small ways. Naming warmth is a way of building it. Each answer draws attention away from hoofbeats and back toward the body, the hearth, the living circle. Fear narrows the world. Imagination gently opens it. The girl names summer dust under bare feet. The boy says that is not warm, it is hot. She says he lacks poetry. He says poetry will not help when dust gets between toes. The man says both of them should save such important debate for Congress, where nonsense is already expected. The woman gives him a look. The joke is risky in shape, but mild in sound. He lowers his eyes, smiling. The children do not fully understand, which may be for the best. Some jokes are seeds planted for later understanding. Political talk among enslaved people existed in different forms, often shaped by caution, rumour, overheard news, religious language, and coded humour. National debates over slavery, territory, abolition, and power filtered into cabins unevenly. Information travelled through newspapers read aloud, white conversations, travellers, markets, churches, and whispers. You sense how little of that can be spoken freely here. Yet people knew more than the powerful often admitted. They listened while serving, hauling, waiting, cooking, driving, mending, and standing near doorways. Silence did not mean ignorance. It often meant strategy. The wind rises and rattles the shutter hard enough to startle the boy. He tries to disguise the flinch as a stretch. Nobody exposes him. Family mercy covers dignity when dignity is thin. The girl only pats his shoulder once, quickly, before he can object. A small insect appears near the hearth, awakened by warmth and deeply confused about the season. It crawls along the floor in a wavering line. The youngest child spots it and whispers a greeting. The insect continues, unimpressed by hospitality. The boy suggests naming it General Beetle. The girl says it is not a beetle. The man says military rank has been given to worse candidates. The woman says the insect may stay only if it pays rent. The insect declines all civic responsibility. The absurdity works beautifully. You hear laughter again. Soft, but real. It moves around the room like another little flame. Outside, the night remains powerful. Inside, a wandering insect has become a guest, a general, and a tenant in arrears. This is how joy survives, by seizing ridiculous material. The woman prepares sleeping places more fully now. Blankets are shaken, layered, and arranged according to need. The children are placed where warmth will hold longest. The man checks the door bar, not dramatically, just carefully. A careful hand can say what words avoid. The bedding smells of smoke, wool, old cotton, and tired bodies. When you touch it, the fabric feels rough at first, then reassuring. It has weight. Weight is welcome in winter. A thin cover only suggests sleep. A heavy cover insists. The girl folds the wooden mule into the youngest child's hand. He is nearly asleep, but his fingers close around it again. The boy claims he was still using it. The girl says the mule chose its rider. The boy accepts this after a grumble, because even he respects mule politics. Another distant sound crosses the yard, only a shutter this time knocking loose somewhere nearby. The man listens, then relaxes. You notice how quickly everyone reads his shoulders. When they lower, the children soften too. Safety is contagious when it comes from someone trusted. The woman sits last, as she so often does. She takes one slow sip of cooled herb drink, grimaces faintly, and says it is almost good if a person has forgotten what good means. The man says forgetting may be useful. She says he may begin with his worst habits. The older children grin into their blankets. Teasing becomes a soft cover over fatigue. It lets adults be more than workers and children be more than duties. It gives the room texture, lightness, and breath. You lie back and see the rafters above you. Firelight flickers there, revealing smoke-darkened wood and hanging bundles. Shadows gather in the corners, but they no longer seem empty. They hold stored tools, folded cloth, seed hopes, and the ordinary clutter of lives continuing. The hoofbeats are gone. The dog is quiet. The insect has vanished under some mysterious authority of its own. The wind remains, but it has become background again, a restless old storyteller outside the walls. You understand that fear and joy are not opposites here. They share the same room. Fear sits near the door, listening. Joy sits by the hearth, making jokes about insects and mules. The family does not wait for fear to leave before laughing. That may be one of the bravest things in the cabin. The fire lowers under its cover of ash. Blankets rise and fall with breathing. The woman's eyes stay open a little longer than the others, watching the door, the hearth, the children, the night. Then even her shoulders soften. The cabin holds the family inside its imperfect walls. Outside, winter keeps its long watch. Inside, warmth survives in coals, in cloth, in play, and in the stubborn little decision to smile when the world has offered so few reasons. You lie down as the cabin grows darker, and the whole room seems to lower itself towards sleep. The fire has been carefully banked, its brightest flames covered under ash so the heat will last. Red points glow in the hearth, quiet as watching eyes. The bedding is arranged in layers, each one placed with long practice. A coarse blanket lies underneath, rough against the packed floor or low pallet. Another cover folds over it, smoky, heavy, and warm from the room's gathered breath. A quilt settles on top like a patient hand. You feel the weight first. It presses gently across your legs, then your chest, then your shoulders. The heaviness is not unpleasant. It is steadying. In a cold room, weight becomes comfort because it reminds the body that warmth can be held close. The youngest child sleeps nearest the safer heat, turned slightly toward the hearth. His small fingers still curl around the carved wooden animal. In the firelight, it could be a horse, a mule, or a heroic creature unknown to science. Sleep improves many species. The older children settle with the restless skill of people who are tired but not yet willing to admit defeat. A foot nudges a shin. A blanket is stolen by accident, then stolen back with purpose. The woman murmurs one warning, and peace is restored through diplomacy. The man checks the door one last time. His hand touches the latch, then the bar, then the frame. It is not fear alone that guides him. It is care shaped into movement. The sound of wood settling into place is small, but the room seems to hear it. He turns toward the hearth and studies the coals. A live coal must remain until morning if fortune allows. Fire saved overnight means less labour in darkness, less wasted kindling, and a warmer beginning. In many cabins and rural homes, banking coals was ordinary wisdom. Ordinary wisdom is often what keeps people alive. The woman lifts a corner of ash with a stick, checking the glow beneath. Satisfied, she covers it again. The ash softens the heat without killing it. There is a lesson there, though the cabin does not announce lessons with a chalkboard. Thankfully, The air near the floor is colder than the air near your face. You can sense little currents moving around the bedding. Cold slips through cracks, but the blankets catch your body's warmth and return it slowly. Your own breathing becomes part of the shelter. Outside, winter walks around the cabin in circles. It worries at the walls, presses the shutter, and slides along the roof. Sometimes it moans through pine branches. Sometimes it pauses so suddenly that the silence feels louder than the wind. You hear distant sounds fading from the quarters, a cough, a low word, a door closing, a dog turning in dry leaves. Then each sound falls away, leaving only the soft interior world of breath, coals, cloth, and dark wood. This is not perfect rest. Enslaved families in Alabama in 1845 did not sleep beyond the reach of forced labor or fear. Morning would bring demands shaped by another person's power, yet sleep still mattered. Bodies needed repair. Minds needed drift. Families needed hours when they belonged, as much as possible, to themselves. Historians continue to debate the nightly rhythms of enslaved households across different farms and plantations. Some people had small amounts of evening control, while others lived under stricter surveillance. The pattern changed with location, labor system, season, household size, and the character of those in power. Inside this room, the night is held carefully. The woman lies down last, as if sleep must wait for her permission. She tucks one blanket around the youngest child, then adjusts another over the girl's shoulder. Her hands move in the dark by memory. A small draft touches your cheek. It smells of damp bark, frozen mud, and far-off smoke. The scent makes the cabin's interior seem warmer by contrast. Your blanket smells of ash, wool, cotton, skin, and cornmeal. It is not perfume. It is life made breathable. The boy whispers something about whether the wooden mule should have a name. The girl answers that names should not be wasted on creatures who cannot behave. He says the mule behaved better than she did. She says that is because the mule was asleep. Their mother says the mule may file complaints in the morning. The children go quiet, satisfied by the absurdity. Humour makes a small pillow for the mind. It gives thought somewhere soft to land. A quirky bedtime habit appears in the room's careful darkness. Some families warmed stones or bricks near the hearth and wrapped them in cloth to ease cold bedding. A warm stone at the feet could feel like a private sunrise. It could also burn toes if handled foolishly, because comfort sometimes has opinions. Near your feet, warmth gathers from a wrapped object placed earlier close to the bedding. It is not hot, only gently warm. Your toes find it and relax at once. The rest of your body follows slowly, like a committee finally reaching agreement. The man lowers himself onto his sleeping place with a controlled sigh. The kind of sigh that tries not to be a groan and almost succeeds. His joints have carried rails, tools, mud, and weather. Now they carry stillness, which may be the strangest weight of all. The woman's breathing slows, but her listening does not vanish. You sense it in the pause between breaths when the wind shifts. Care does not fall asleep all at once. It leaves a guard posted somewhere inside the heart. The girl rolls onto her side and pulls the quilt under her chin. Firelight touches her face, then withdraws as a coal dims. She is young, yet her day has held work. Mending, caution, laughter, prayer, and secret marks in ash. Sleep gathers all of it without asking permission. The boy fights sleep with a stubborn blink. His eyes focus on the rafters, where shadows gather around hanging herbs. The shapes may become animals in his mind, or roads, or faces, or nothing at all. Childhood and exhaustion make excellent lanterns. The youngest child coughs once. Everyone waits. He sleeps through it. The woman's hand moves toward him, then pauses when his breathing steadies. Her hand returns to her blanket. Relief moves through the room without sound. You feel your own thoughts loosening. The day's hard edges blur. Field mud, needle flash, bitter herbs, Hand games, neighbourly knocks, hoofbeats, and laughter all drift together in the dimness. Nothing disappears, it softens. The cabin's materials surround you with their quiet histories. Pine logs cut and stacked, clay pushed into gaps, cloth saved, torn and mended, iron blackened by years of flame, gourds dried into usefulness. Each thing has become part of the family's fragile defence against cold and uncertainty. No object here is idle. Even darkness does work. It covers tired faces. It hides thin places in cloth. It lets private dreams rise without being inspected. Darkness, for all its dangers, can also offer mercy. Outside, the moon is hidden by cloud. You imagine the yard under pale frost, the paths hardened at their edges, the cabins low and dark beneath the trees. Smoke rises slowly where coals still breathe. Somewhere, another family has banked their fire with the same careful hope. The mainstream history of this place often speaks in broad forces: cotton, slavery, law, migration, markets, land, and expansion. Those forces are real, and they press against every wall here. Yet the night teaches another scale of history. A blanket pulled over a child is history. A coal saved under ash is history. A joke whispered in darkness is history. A name remembered is history. A family lying close enough to share warmth is history. Though no official record pauses to admire it, the wind lowers for a little while. The cabin seems to float in the hush left behind. You hear breathing more clearly now, one breath deep and slow, one slightly whistling, one uneven with dreams. The room becomes a small orchestra of sleep. The fire gives a tiny collapse. Ash shifts over ember. A red glow brightens briefly, then fades. You feel no alarm. The coal remains alive. Its light is small, but small light is enough when the room knows how to keep it. The woman whispers a final phrase, perhaps prayer, perhaps a name, perhaps only a sound made while surrendering to rest. It slips into the blankets and disappears. The man does not answer, but his hand shifts near hers in the dark. You sense their closeness without turning it into sentiment. This family lives under conditions that wound and threaten them. Their tenderness is not decoration placed over suffering. It is resistance woven through daily acts, plain and persistent. The older children fall quiet at last. The boy's hand relaxes beside the bedding. The girl's breathing lengthens. The youngest child makes one small sound and sinks deeper. The carved mule remains on duty, silent and entirely unqualified. The cabin is warmest at its centre, coldest at its edges. So are many lives. The family has gathered at the centre for the night, not because the edges vanish, but because human beings know how to make circles against them. Your eyelids grow heavier. The smell of smoke becomes less sharp. The blanket's roughness becomes familiar. The wind's voice becomes steady enough to blur into something almost like a lullaby. Even the floor beneath you seems less hard now. There is no grand ending to the day. No bell rings. No narrator closes a ledger. Rest arrives by degrees, as practical as supper and as mysterious as prayer. It enters through loosened fingers, slower breath, and the patient warmth trapped under cloth. You lie still beneath the layered blankets, while the Alabama winter continues outside. The cabin does not conquer the cold. It negotiates with it. It holds back enough wind, keeps enough ember, saves enough heat, and gathers enough love to carry everyone toward morning. And in that fragile enough piece sleep begins. Now the room grows softer, and the story loosens its hold on every sharp detail. The hearth is only a low red memory beneath grey ash. The wind still moves outside, but its voice has drifted farther away, as if it has grown tired of asking to enter. You feel the blanket rise and fall with your breathing. It is heavy, warm, and smoky, holding the shape of the body beneath it. Around you, the cabin rests in layers of shadow. The rafters are dark. The door is still. The little covered window waits for dawn. Let the sounds become simple now, a breath, a coal, a soft turn in sleep, a faint sigh of wood cooling in the wall. Nothing hurries. Nothing asks you to stand. The night folds itself slowly around the cabin, and the cabin folds itself around the sleeping family. The world beyond the door remains wide, cold, and uncertain. But here, for this gentle moment, you may rest your attention on warmth that has survived. Warmth in cloth, warmth in coals, warmth in hands that mended, shared, cooked, guarded, and comforted. The child sleeps with the wooden animal held close. The older children dream without speaking. The woman's hand lies relaxed near the blanket's edge. The man's breath moves slow and deep. The cabin holds them, not perfectly, but faithfully. Let the last image be small. One ember under ash, red and quiet, not gone. It waits through darkness without showing off. It keeps a little heat for the unknown morning. It asks nothing from you now, so breathe slowly, sink gently. Let the winter wind become distant. Let the blankets grow heavier. Let the cabin fade into smoke, shadow, and rest. End of script. Sleep well.